What are you working right now, Aditi?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
my entire LinkedIn following is me sharing the pathway to permanent residency. That's the
Oh, you are also on the same grounds with Soundarya?
Saundarya is more on terms of like O1 visas, but I talk about EB1s more. So she's more in terms of like merit-based short-term solutions, but I focus on merit-based long-term solutions. Uh,
Oh,
Again, we're all talking from the perspective of being an Indian immigrant in the US and all the struggles that we have to overcome and all of it. Hi, Robert. Oh my gosh, you're so on brand with the H1-B guy name. You look at you,
On brand.
on brand behavior.
Hmm.
Are you drinking your cup of coffee now?
I'm on my second. Are you gonna hold that against me?
What is going on in your life that you need a second cup of coffee on a Saturday morning?
I normally am a twofer every day.
Two coffees per day? Like you stack them
Mm-hmm.
up? You stack them up?
Yeah, back to back. And then I may have an espresso in the afternoon.
What's your heart rate? I need to
Right now, I'll tell you. I get real amped up before webinar, so it's probably pretty high. Let's see.
Damn.
oh,
Well, between 71 and 121 right now.
Is that
So,
normal? I don't know.
yeah, about
yeah,
90 to
that's normal.
100. Yeah.
He's like, it's not normal. That's Krishna. He joined earlier. Hi, Ria. How are you? I don't know if Ria on mute or something. TalkMate bot will probably record this call. That's what's happening. Robert, do you want it to like? Do you have like a slide deck or some sort? Do you want to go down that route?
No, I got the questions you sent me.
Mhm.
I figured we can do like maybe a little bit of an intro, and I really prefer it to just be real interactive Q&A if folks want
Okay.
to throw them at me rapid fire, if we want to work off the list.
Yeah, yeah. We can we,
Really
we can do both. So
just
let me. Yeah, go
it's a
ahead.
coffee talk, right? I mean,
There's a coffee talk. I mean, listen, I mean, I go with what the person wants to go with. We have had we have had more of like typically, and I didn't say this to you, so it's like, you know what, let me just get Robert on because this is a different kind of event, but usually
yeah.
I have folks who got their green cards through their EB1 route, like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just the extraordinary visa, and
Mm-hmm.
it's divided between 30-30.
Mm-hmm.
So the first 30 minutes, they're talking about, you know, their journey in the US, how they built the profile, what strategies they used, what roadblocks they experienced, all of that.
Yep.
And then we, for the next 30 minutes, we open it up to Q&A. So
Perfect.
we have had that as well. So if you'd like to,
Well, I think between the H1B lottery, an intro, and maybe talking about some alternatives,
yeah,
that should probably give us enough to lead into the Q&A.
yeah, yeah, that's
Cool.
fine. I mean, you know, we'll keep it chill.
Yeah.
But I'm just excited to have you here,
Same.
and thank you so much for giving your time to us. This is wonderful. Do you have like a link where people can like support your work or something?
Yeah, absolutely. I have several of them. Let me grab this.
Yeah, why don't you put that in the chat and I will wrap this up and I'll send the email to people as well. So, you know, if they want to support your channel, if they want to support your work, that'd be great. Hi, Dania? Dania or Dania? I don't know. Muzammil, Oluwatoyosi, Puneet, Ravi, Ria, Sayan, Shivam, Yogesh. How are you? Hi, Abby.
Hi, Aditi. Thank you for doing this. Thank you.
Of course, of course.
Thanks, Aditi. Good morning. Thank
Good
you,
morning.
Candace.
Love your display picture. All right, we're gonna wait those, and there are like still folks coming in, so I'm like trying to multitask. All right, awesome. The H1B guy. All right, Robert. I think it's 11. Let's give like another 3 minutes
Absolutely. Yep.
for folks to trickle in. So, as we are waiting for people, tell me how you drink your coffee now that you have like several
Uh-oh.
of them.
Are you gonna judge me for this? But I'm just a
I'm
straight black
I'm
guy.
already judging you.
Uh,
The judgment has already begun. What do you mean?
I drink it straight black.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
I'm
so
an espresso guy though,
you're the
so
okay. So
yeah.
put it in the chat. Okay, people who are on the call, put it in the chat. What kind of coffee do you like? Somebody has come in hot and he's like,
Yeah,
I might be in America, but I'm Indian, so I'm gonna go for tea.
my wife is more of a tea girl too, Sri Ram. So
You know. But you know, this is one of the reverse culture shock that they're not culture shock, like reverse thing that happens because when you're
yeah,
in the US, like you get used to these ginormous cup of tubs, which we
yeah,
call coffee. But
yep,
back home, it's more like a smaller cup, like regular, normal cup, not like the Tyrannosaurus Rex kind of cups that
yes,
we get over here.
yep,
So it is like the weirdest thing. And I'm like, I'm drinking my coffee for the next 15, 20, half hour. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
But then you go back home and it's like the tiniest of cups. And I've seen this. This is not an India versus America thing. This is America versus the world thing.
you're
Where
not wrong.
if you go to Europe and you're like these small cups of coffee and I'm like, where is my huge tub of caffeine? Like,
Yeah,
how are people operating with these like drops of coffee, you know? So love hate relationship is all I'm gonna say. So I'm not judging you because I'm on the same boat as you. But
we do like large cups though
I
here
love
in the
large
U.S.
cups.
There's no
You
doubt
need that. You know, you
that's a
need
real
that.
thing.
It's a good thing that I've learned over here. But as people are pouring in, I don't want you to miss out on any information that Robert has up his sleeve. I asked Robert, when did we meet Robert? Last year, maybe.
It was, yeah, last fall.
Yeah. So I reached out to Robert and we were like, okay, why is a white man talking about H1B? That's the first question I asked him. I'm like, I am used to like us kind of people talking about
Yeah.
all foreign borns, mostly Indians. We're talking about H1B.
Hmm.
And
Right.
here's a guy, like he's named himself the H1B guy, and
Yeah.
he does not have the same shade as me on the Rihanna
Yeah.
foundation palette. And I'm like,
No,
what is going on, Robert? Tell me.
several degrees lighter, that's for sure.
Several degrees later,
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
why is a white man so obsessed with H1B? And then
Yeah.
he told me about his story. So I'm gonna let
Yeah.
Robert tell you that story, but I do want to read out a little bit of his bio. He is the chief operating officer at Tier 4 Group, and he's got a banging following on YouTube under the name H1B Guy. If you want the scoop on H1B, I'd suggest you follow Robert, not because of his like insights, but the way he distills it down in a way that is understandable to you. So he does God's work in taking USCIS guidelines, which are so nebulous and so convoluted, and converts it in a way that is digestible. So Robert,
Mm.
from the immigrant community, we thank you for your service,
Yeah.
and we want to know how you got started in H1B, and then.
Yep.
After that, for the next 10 to 15 minutes, Robert is going to talk about the new developments that are coming up, some alternatives if you cannot get H1B, what do you do next? But we are going to, if I understand you correctly, Robert, we're going to spend a lion's share of our time just taking questions from you. So have those
Yep.
questions locked and ready. Soon after Robert is done, we are going to launch into just you asking questions, and we'll do that for the next 55 minutes. Okay?
Absolutely.
All
Yes.
right, Robert, the floor is
All
yours.
right.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, Dr. P, thank you for having me on. You've built quite the community as well, thus the fact that almost 30 folks are joining us on a webinar here on Saturday. So that speaks volumes to what you do for the community as well. I have been in recruiting and staffing since 2004. And for those of us who have ever recruited before, or some of you who may be considering it, there's no degree for recruiting. You just kind of get into it. And I've always had this ability to be a connector, and recruiting fulfilled that like drive in me as a person. And so I worked for a technology company, and they were like, hey, we're having a hard time finding systems engineers. Do you think you could help us out? And I self-taught myself how to recruit. And so from there, made several placements internally, and I moved over to the agency side for a billion-dollar company called Kforce. From there is where I got my first exposure to H-1B visas. So this time frame is early mid 2000s, 2007, and I quickly realized that if I was going to place Java developers back in the day, when that was a really hot skill set, not that it isn't now, but I realized that I was going to have to do so utilizing individuals that were working on H-1B visas. And so that's where I was self-taught. And what is an H-1B visa? Why do these consultants have these restrictions? Why are they asking me for all of these documents? Because it's really, as you mentioned, a very confusing landscape. And when you get into the recruiting side, where you have clients who have demand but can't fill roles because there are restrictions around these consultants, it becomes a very difficult thing to navigate. And so over time, I just became more and more of an expert in the space with an ability to speak to, can we work with this person? Can our client hire this person? And then in 2013, I launched an immigration program for a very large staffing firm here in Atlanta. And that took off very quickly, to the point to where I was processing hundreds of H-1B visas and running perm labor for over 100 individuals. And in doing so, became really a subject matter expert in the staffing space. And so that's what has made my voice unique in this community is, as you mentioned, I'm not an immigrant and I'm not an attorney. And so where I really decided to continue to focus my efforts from there and building out this program was opportunities that were being provided for our employees. We took very good care of our people. They took good care of us. And I learned very quickly that that's what matters most in staffing, is that the employee experience and the candidate experience really matters. So fast forward, COVID hits, and I am serving as a delivery leader over a very large program, of which very quickly overnight, we lost 90% of our consultants. And like many individuals in the recruitment industry, my role was impacted. And right around Memorial Day of 2020, the world was crazy for a lot of us at that time. And I had this vision of the H-1B guy. That's what a lot of people refer to me internally as. Hey, go ask Robert. He's the H-1B guy. And so what I did from there is I've been on YouTube a long time. I love theme parks and entertainment, so I followed a lot of YouTubers in that space. And I was like, I wonder if people are talking about immigration. And so I went on YouTube and I saw that it was mainly immigrants and attorneys. There was like no people that looked and talked like I do. And so I said, I wanted to help other staffing firms maintain compliance as it related to their H-1B programs. And so I decided that I was going to launch a consulting practice and call it the H-1B Guy, come up with the H1Bguy.com. And I figured I'd just post some stuff on YouTube just as a manner of creating my brand, right? And driving attention to my website. And I got my first client. I launched June 29th of 2020, first client day one. And it really kind of took off very quickly and organically from there. But one of the reasons that it did is because at the time there was this bill in the Senate called S-386. And for those of you who may or may not be familiar, that bill was the Fairness for High Skilled Immigrants Act. And it was about green card recapture and a process to eliminate the green card backlog. And so now my work experience coincided with my political interests. And very quickly, I was able to become an advocate for the green card backlog, because as a staffing professional, what do I want most? That's access to talent, right? It just is. That's the nature of who I am. And so ultimately, I think my voice became very unique in the sense that I cover news, I break down articles. I've been following and covering the Visa Bulletin since 2010. So 14 years of covering and following the Visa Bulletin. And so people were interested in my predictions. And when I launched the channel, I never really thought that'd be something folks would be interested in me doing. But very clearly, it's one of my most popular posts every month. Folks are interested in it. And listen, they're guesses. They're literally hunches. And those hunches are based on me tracking this thing for 14 years. But one of the things that I want to make sure that we take away from here today is understanding what your options are. So if you're considering or going down the H1B path and you're someone from India or China, you need to understand that you're not playing on the same terms as individuals from other parts of the world. Okay, that's something that is very important for you to know, and you need to do so willingly, knowing willingly that you could be in a 150-year backlog, as is widely covered and talked about in the immigrant community. But let's talk about the H1B lottery, because that opened this Wednesday, March the 6th at noon Eastern. And the last 4 years, the H1B lottery has gone to a digital registration, and that is via online platform. There's a $10 fee that was associated per registration per each individual from an employer perspective. And so what we saw is it was the first time that candidates actually had some leverage, where in order to increase your probability of being selected, you could have multiple employers register you via the lottery. And so what happened really year over year, and we can go back the first year, or 2022, or for fiscal year 2022, it was 275,000 approximately registrations. The next year, that number jumped over 350. And then last year we saw 750 plus thousand, but of that 750 plus thousand, just a little over 300,000 of those were unique, meaning it was just one name. So we saw a lot of crackdown that occurred really towards the end of the fiscal year in duplicate registrations and fraudulent registrations. And so this year, the biggest change that has been put into place is what we're calling one passport or one travel document, one shot. And it's creating a beneficiary-centric, unique identifier for individuals. So that means 3 or 4 employers can register you, but you're only going to be put in one time based on your passport or your travel document. You still have the option, though, of deciding, if you are selected, which potential employer you would like to work for, depending on who's providing you the best offer with the best benefits. That is the one option of flexibility that still does exist. I've received a lot of questions around, but do you recommend, or do I advise you pursuing multiple registrations? And my answer is, I think you need to do so cautiously. And what I mean by that is, if you have 2 competing offers, I would be okay in supporting a couple of registrations. But when we're talking about having a lot of different companies, 8, 9, 10 register you, and then if you're selected, you're going to have to make a decision there. I don't know if I would advise or recommend that you take that kind of approach. A couple of other things of note. The registration fee is still $10. So if you have an employer who's considering registering you, you have until March 22nd, 12 p.m. Eastern in order to get registered. Okay. And they simply have to create an online organizational account and register you based on the passport, on your passport. Okay. The other thing is the deadline being March 22nd at noon. My expectations is that the random selection will most likely happen sometime starting as early as March 23rd. Notifications could go out, which is a Saturday, and then potentially on Monday the 25th or Tuesday the 26th. But if you're someone who is being registered and put into the lottery, or you've already been registered, My best guess right now is anywhere between the 23rd and the 26th that we'll have a notification. Okay. The biggest thing to note for next year is that that registration fee is slated to increase to $215 per registration per individual. Okay, so it's a $205 increase that will be slated for the fiscal year 2026 lottery. Okay, beginning on April 1st, if you're selected, you can now file your H1-B application digitally, so your employer can submit a digital application. They're still accepting paper applications for a period of time, but this is USCIS for the first time starting on April 1st, where they will begin to accept digital online Form I-129s and I-907s, which is premium processing. So that's a change for this year as well to be aware of. A lot of you may be interested in, what if I'm not selected? What are my options? And unfortunately, of the options that I'm going to give you here, I don't love any of them, but they are ones that you need to be aware of. If you're somebody that is already in the US in an alternate status, let's say you're an OPT or OPT STEM and potentially reaching your maximum stay, I generally would recommend to you to consider one of two pursuits, and that would be a day one CPT in either another master's program or a PhD type program where you can continue to work. I would also recommend you look at some sort of cap exempt part-time type scenario as well. Open Avenues is a very popular organization, and Danielle Goldman and her team are excellent at what they do, but they offer cap exempt where you're basically a fellow working within a research or university on a part-time basis, and it does allow you to have a cap exempt H1B. The other option is Canada. And on my channel, I have two sponsors. They are paid for sponsors, but I trust and recommend both of them wholeheartedly. And the first one is Mob Squad, and the next one is Syndesis. Both provide sort of different services with the similar intention in mind, and that is to take your current occupation here in the US and relocate that to Canada. And that really just depends on location of where you're working and what types of provincial agreements they have in place. But I highly recommend both of those. That's Mob Squad and Syndesis. And please, if you do reach out to them, let them know you heard about them from me. You'll go to the front of the list in terms of response and service. So I think those are really the key things to consider. The other thing is, at the end of the day, 60 days, deadline comes up, and you consider leaving the US. I know that's the worst case scenario, leaving the US. And if you are considering leaving the US, my advice is at least know what your destination is and where you're going. I understand many of you are most likely from India. Of course, we've seen a significant increase in the technology advancements and all across India, as well as we've seen a rise in compensation in India as well, which is an interesting aspect of if you are considering, hey, I don't want to go back, but if I do, I can go back, work, and then continue to try my hand at the H1B lottery. So I know that was a lot about me, a lot about the lottery, and some alternatives. So I saw a bunch of questions come in. Let me see if I can pull those up in the chat, and I will roll through them. And if you guys just want to funnel them in here, I'll absolutely
Robert,
go through those. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you know the names of people who asked those questions? So maybe if they are here, we can ask them to ask those questions directly, so we can have some interaction as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So looks like the first one is from Sriram, and he's talking about the quota on country of birth for green cards. So that is something that I would say you have to be aware of. And the way that the current law reads for employment-based preferences, so that means all categories, EB1, EB2, EB3, EB4, EB5, all of them, there are 140,000 that are made available each fiscal year starting on October 1st. Of every year up to October 1st is the beginning of the government's fiscal year. So 140,000 are made available each fiscal year. but only 7% of those can go to any one country. And so this is where the concept and the name green card backlog has become really prominent in our lexicon. And the reason for that is almost 90% of all H1B visas go to individuals from India and China. The number's about 88% or so. But think about that, 88% of all H1B visas go to individuals from India or China. And so that's 85,000 visas that's issued annually. But yet only 7% of 140,000 can go to any one country. And I believe that number is right around 9,000 or so. Apologies on my fuzzy math. I don't have the number in front of me. But that's what creates this idea and the term green card backlog, is it has created the necessity to establish priority dates from the Department of State. And those priority dates are in two different charts. So you've got chart A and chart B. Chart A is what is referred to as final action dates. And those final action dates are the date that your prevailing wage determination was filed, okay? Whereas dates of filing ultimately are a matter of a matter of when the date was filed. They will accept the chart B anytime between October 1st, generally the beginning of each fiscal year, October 1st, November, and December. This year we saw it go as far as February, which was a reach that we hadn't seen before, where USCIS accepted chart B, which were the dates of filing. Again, that's that date where your prevailing wage determination was filed. So I hope that helps answer that question. Let's see. Jay Yanduri says some consultants don't have the tools to detect duplicates, or someone fooling me. I'm assuming you're talking about duplicate registrations, Jay?
Yeah, so sorry, I was just talking about duplicate registrations. One of the consultancies told me that US government doesn't have the tools to detect the duplicates. Is that right? Or
So this past year, Jay, is where they were cracking down on relationships where the companies maybe had some sort of financial relationship. We'll hear this term sister company. You may have heard that before, Jay.
Yep.
Like, hey, my sister company is going to file. In those scenarios, I would recommend that you only have one of those companies register you, not the multiples, to increase your chances. It's just my guidance here. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but ultimately, what you don't want to get in a situation of is where you potentially a notice of intent to deny if you're selected and applied, and they detect some sort of fraudulence. This is where my best advice to you is you want to mitigate your risk as much as possible. So anytime you're talking to a consultancy and they say, hey, we're going to increase your odds, we'll have my sister company apply too, I maybe advise you to back off that.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to understand that. Thank you.
Perfect. Appy asks, is there any chance there could be a second lottery? You finished your PhD a few months ago and landed a role you've not yet started. So, Appy, that's a great question. And here's where I fall on the sword. When we do predictions, a lot of times we can be wrong. And the last several years, I have not gotten whether or not there's going to be a second lottery or not correct. Literally, I'm like, oh, for the last 3 years. But I do believe, based on the changes that USCIS has put in place this year, I don't think that they want to hold a second lottery. I honestly didn't believe that they were going to hold one last year, and then they did, which they held one right at the very end of July. But that was because application rates were extremely low based on the crackdown of the fraud that I've alluded to already. So I think that if you're asking me, hey, what should you do? Should you go ahead and see if they can register you right now? I mean, that would be my best advice. I don't know if that's a possibility for you since you haven't started, but I would ask them, hey, if you can go ahead and register me by March 22nd, you know, it wouldn't be active until October 1st of this year. And then it would allow me to extend my time here in the US, you know, past your OPT, or I'm assuming you're on an OPT.
Yes, correct. Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Does that make sense? Have you
Yeah,
had the conversation with your
I have
HR
not,
or
because
talent
I
out?
literally just landed the role, and my thought has been, I've been reading about potential second H1-B lotteries from various forums, and
Yep.
it confuses me because often the number of applications that go in, the legitimate number of applications is higher than the number of people that are going to be picked. So
Correct.
what determines a second or third lottery?
Yeah, great question. So in order to be eligible for the second lottery, Abby, you would have to have been registered for the first one. Does that make sense?
Yes, okay.
So they don't open it back up for new registrations. What happens is that so for this year, I'm expecting there to be 325,000 registrations. 325,000. Now that's unique individuals, okay? So that means there's going to be 325,000 unique individuals registered. My guess is that USCIS will select approximately 100,000 registrations with the assumption that 80% of those will apply.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
So if they thought 100% of those that were selected would apply, they would only select 85,000.
I see.
So what happens, and what we've seen over the last couple of years, is that they've selected 100, 110, 120,000, but only 60,000 or 45,000 are submitting applications. So the application rates have been extremely low, and that's been extremely low because there's been this concept of multiple registrations for individuals.
I see. Okay.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense. That leaves extra people for, the second lottery. I get it.
Yep.
Okay.
So then they have a pool of those that weren't selected that then would be eligible if a second lottery were to be held.
I understand. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
Robert.
Hi. Yeah. Hey, Nimruth, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. I had a question regarding the alternatives, right? If H1B doesn't get So my employer is filing the perm application for me.
Yeah.
And so my query was, so what happens once the perm process is done? And I believe it's I-140, right? I'm totally sure. So what happens then? And if the H1B doesn't get
So would you be, you would have, let's say, an approved I-140, but you'd be in an alternate status, such as like an OPT EAD?
Yes.
Okay. And you're from India, I'm assuming, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And your employer, do they have an international presence?
They do.
Okay. What other locations do they have?
I believe they do have Canada, India, and other European locations too.
Okay. So again, here's why I'm asking you that question. If you're not selected in the H1B lottery, even though you have a perm labor that's been filed and approved I-140, once your OPT EAD expires, your OPT EAD STEM expires, it's a 60-day window for you. Okay. If your employer has an office in Canada or in India, the reason why I ask that is that you could then decide to exit the country. You have an approved I-140, okay? And ultimately, while you're outside of the country, you have a couple of options. You could continue to go into the H1B lottery each year, or if you work for your employer outside of the US for at least a year, okay, for 12 months or longer, then you could consider the L1 path. Now, if you're a manager, L1A, if you're not, L1B. That could be another option for you, and that takes approximately 18 months. So think about it, 12 months outside of the US and approximately 6 months to apply for the L1 and get the approval. And having that I-140, you could come back to the US and work for potentially 5 years if it was on L1 and continue to try for the H1B lottery while you're on L1, and then you just would change status to H. Does that make sense?
Okay, got it. But then what is the point of the perm certification then?
The point of the perm is that ultimately your priority date will come current at some point, and as long as you're working for that current employer, you could always file for an adjustment of status, whether you're in the US or outside of the US, especially if you're still working for the same company that has your perm and your approved I-140. If you're outside of the US, they could always choose to bring you back as a green card that was filed outside of the US. So it's good to have it. It gives you some options. Having the approved I-140 also allows you, for if you ever get selected in the H1B lottery, you can continue to extend your H1B time in 3-year increments indefinitely until your priority date comes current.
Okay, got it. Makes sense. So it's just to get in line for the green card and not
yeah, I mean, I think you have a couple of options, right? Especially if your employer has an office in Canada. You know, again, I talk about Canada a lot, but you know, that would probably be the path that I would recommend if they were willing to relocate you to Canada, to their offices in Canada.
Makes sense. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Robert, thanks so much for the question answer. So we are right on the half-hour mark. So can we have folks like raise their hands and ask questions and limit it to one question per folk, so that we have like maximum time with everybody? Is that cool?
Absolutely.
Okay. And
can you help me just call on like who's next?
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, I get in the zone and I'll miss the line. I apologize.
No, that's totally fine. I'll do that. And also, like, I know that you have an expert's eye. So out of all the questions that were submitted to you, if you see some that are recurring, or like you think, oh, wow, like this question, it's important, like you can also weave those answers in with the questions that folks are going to ask right now.
Yeah, there was actually one I wanted to hit on from there that stood out to me, which is kind of a unique question, that, you know, it's really two of them. So one was, a question about, can I apply for an H4 EAD based on their spouse's visa while still holding an F1? And that answer is actually no. It's a really interesting question. I don't see it a lot, but you cannot be on F1 or H4 like in concurrent. I thought that one was pretty good. The other one was about O1 and H1B that really stood out to me. Can we apply for other visas such as O1 along with H1B? You can apply for either, but I always recommend, if you are someone that is even close to qualifying for an O1A, you pursue that option first. And if there's time at the end, there are a few others that I can definitely go through, but those were the two that really stood out most to me and I wanted to jump on.
Awesome. So I'll go through the list, and I will request everybody to keep one question per person. We want to be respectful of everybody's time. If there's still time at the end, we'll come back to you. All right, Mastering and Light, go for it.
Hi Robert, good morning. So my question is, can a student who is in a last semester can apply for H1B? If so, does it come under master's cap or the general cap of the H1B?
Yeah, good question. So there's 65,000 in the general and 25,000 in the advanced US. Having a US master's gives you kind of the best of both, because the general drawing goes first, you're eligible in that 65, and then the 20,000 is held second, and you'd be eligible in that if not selected. So it does kind of, if you want to look at it from that perspective, increase your probability of selection, probably closer to 30% versus 25% for those that are in the 65K.
So you recommend me to go with the 65K cap, right?
Well, I would always advise you to pursue a master's in the advanced degree category. The odds of being selected tend to be higher there. But again, you know, if you have an international bachelor's, again, it's one of those situations where you'd be eligible in both categories.
So in case if I have any unsuccessful event in the Masters cap, then I can also, they will pick my lottery in the 25K cap also, right? That's really
Well, it actually goes the other way. The 65K
oh.
is held first, and then the Masters is second.
Oh, if I happen to don't get
And
any
they do them
chance in
simultaneously. It just you just go into the first pool, and then if you have a Masters, it's into the second. Does that make sense?
Oh, got you, Robert. Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
Cool. Yep. Absolutely.
Awesome. Puneet Kaur.
Thank you, Aditi. Hi, Robert. I'm just going to add to Namrat's question. So my situation is exactly the same. My company has presence in Canada and India. I always
Yeah.
used to think if I ask them to, file for my perm,
Yeah.
and if I don't get picked in the H1B, will they allow me to? I mean, will the USCIS allow me to work? And you answered that question, but I wanted to understand, why did you say you would prefer Canada over
Yeah.
any other country? Is it because of the? I would like to believe it's because of the geographical. I mean, we're in the same time zone. It becomes
Yep.
easier for the company. That is
Mm-hmm.
one part that I think, but I'm not sure. I wanted to know why you said that.
Okay, so it's a great question, and I have a list of reasons why. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned geography, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is first. So by geography, I also would equate that to time zones. So depending on if you're in Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific, you can always align yourself in Canada to the time zone that your employer sits in. So your work day really doesn't change in that sense, unless you're going to a location in Canada that may be in a different time zone, but you're still going to your employer's headquarters. Okay. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing is cost of living. You know, housing, depending on where you are, Vancouver, Toronto, very high, like New York or San Francisco, but other cities, Calgary, Halifax, Edmonton, they tend to be more of like the Atlantas, the Dallases, the Denvers in terms of overall housing costs and cost of living. The other thing is there is universal health care in Canada, so that's a big thing. It's a huge cost savings. Compensation tends to be about the same, if not a little bit less. So I just think in terms of like what is the most comparable to the US, other than the climate can be a little bit dicey depending on where you are. Canada is that option. They do business in two languages, English and some in French. So to me, that's where, you know, why I say that is because it's geography, cost of living, similarity of living, good internal infrastructure. So I think that answers the question.
Yeah. Makes sense. I had thought of all those points. I thought maybe there is an immigration point of view that I did not think of, but thank you very much for
There
confirming my.
actually
There
is,
is.
and I'm yeah,
Oh.
and I would like to hit on that. I know we were doing one question, but I think this is a great point and worth mentioning. If you enter Canada under their GTS, their Global Talent Stream program, that's like a temporary visa for up to 2 years. But if you're living and working in Canada in a full-time occupation, it can help expedite your Canadian permanent residency in anywhere between 12 to 24 months. So you could be a Canadian permanent resident in approximately 2 years.
Okay. And eventually a citizen if I tend to
That's
live there
about a
for more than five.
four
Yeah, it's
4 to 6 year
4 years.
plan. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Also, but one should mention that, like, if you do have a Canadian citizenship, then you qualify for a TN visa
Mm-hmm.
Right.
to the US. However, if you think that, oh, I'm gonna go for my Canadian visa, let go of my Indian citizenship and get a Canadian citizenship, and maybe that's gonna be a hack to get out of the 150-year wait time. Unfortunately, no, because American
No.
immigration says
No.
we're not going to
Yeah.
decide to get you a green card based on your country of citizenship. It's still
Mm-hmm.
to adjudicate you on country of birth. Isn't that?
Mm-hmm. And with a TN, it's not meant to be dual intent
Yeah.
either, so it's very tough to adjust status.
Yeah. It's always a trade-off. Well, thank you,
Thank
Jay.
you. Thank you very much, both of you.
Robert. Jay
Absolutely.
and then Nigar. Jay, go for it.
Yeah, hi. So my question is regarding the EB1. Now, once we file the H1B application, in my case, I work as a IT program manager for the last 17 years, and my consultant was referring that we will start off the EB1 process as soon as possible, etc. So I have no idea about it. I just wanted to understand, is that something that is realistic, and what is the best case scenario in getting the green card, and what is the worst case?
Yeah, are you a program manager with direct reports?
Yes.
Okay. And in the EB1 category, do you think that your employer would be pursuing like an EB1C?
I'm not really sure what category he's going to do it, but I mean,
Okay.
I've been in the UK. I've been in London for the last 17 years. I'm a British
Yeah,
citizen, but country of
yeah,
birth is India again.
yeah.
So when I
And
come
while you
there,
were in the
yeah,
UK,
yeah,
you've had direct reports for more than a
yeah,
year?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I'm assuming that they're looking at EB1C for you because that's the
Hmm.
managerial
Okay.
part. EB1 has really three: EB1A, which
Hmm.
Dr. P talks about a lot,
Hmm.
EB1B and EB1C, which I've covered a good bit, and that's managerial. So those are folks that have
Okay.
been a manager outside of the US for at least a year, then come to the US in an alternate
Okay.
status. So that
Okay.
makes you eligible for EB1C. It will help fast track you a little bit, but understand there still are priority dates that are established
Yeah.
for India EB1. The bulletin actually came out yesterday, and it's March 1st of 2021. So it's
Okay.
about a 3+, if not more than that, wait time
Okay.
from when your perm would be certified and I-140 approved.
Okay. And will that have to be in the same company that I have worked in
It
other
does.
countries? Yeah. Okay.
It
Okay.
does. Yep.
Okay.
That's the
Cool.
key. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the link, Aditi.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, Nigar, go for it.
Hi, Aditi and Robert. Thank you so much for arranging this. So my question was about when I should ask the company that I need the sponsorship. Like yesterday, I received an offer from a very large company in the US, but recruiter didn't ask if I need sponsorship. Manager didn't ask, and in the application, I know it's probably wrong, but my friends recommended me don't put a tick if I need sponsorship in the future because ATS can auto reject me, and I didn't do that.
Yeah.
So now I'm worried. I accepted the offer. I put my things for the background check. Soon they will want documents for I-9. And can they just rescind the offer because I need it? Or if they didn't ask, it means it's fine. Also, like the end deadline for the lottery is March 22. So is it probably late? Should I even bring it up? Because I
Yeah.
got offers rescinded before after they knew I needed. So now I was scared to talk about it. What's your recommendation?
Yeah. Um, I've been asked this question 1,000 times, right? And my advice to you is always transparency. And sometimes fear can cripple us with being as transparent as we need to because we're afraid of the answer, right? And as on the other side, as an employer, I would rather know, but that's me. Not all employers are created equal, but I would rather know the situation going in. And so, you asked me, should you go into the lottery? My answer would be yes. If you think you can have a conversation with them and they're willing to register you and submit you in, yes, because you only get so many shots when you're on an OPT. You literally get 3, especially if you have an OPT EAD
Yeah.
STEM, if you're eligible for the extension. Once those 3 shots are up, then you have to look at what are the alternatives, like we've talked about. So look, they didn't ask you most likely because they're okay with you being on an EAD, is my guess. It's my guess. I'm just making a huge guess. But I think if you were to go to HR or TA or the recruiter that you've been working with and let them know, hey, do you think there's any possibility that they could get me registered in the H1B lottery before March 22nd, I would rather know that answer now,
Yeah.
right?
Do you think they can get angry and rescind the offer?
There's always a possibility of that, right? There is. But my question to you would be, is that what's best for you? Right?
Yeah,
If
no,
they
no,
get
no.
angry and they tell you we're going to rescind the offer, is that somewhere that you want to be wasting your time without the possibility of sponsorship, right? Because all that will be to you at that point will be a paycheck. And I know that's important to a lot of us. We don't work for free. And you're here to pursue an opportunity, better yourself, your skills, your life, your family, but don't sit working for an employer or in a job and in a role that they're not going to help you stay here in the US.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, since it's a little bit late now, I'm thinking if this this company like rescinds it and I won't get any offer before March 22, do you think I can raise this question next year, or that won't be right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, my advice is now, but if you want to
Yeah.
work for them for a little bit and, have the conversation ongoing, making sure that it's the right fit for you going forward, you could absolutely handle it that way too.
Yeah, if they see like I'm working well, maybe they will think, oh, we can sponsor you then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nihar, can I
Thank you.
suggest something?
Yes, of course, Aditi.
I'm gonna drop the LinkedIn of Varun Negandhi. He's a good friend of mine.
Oh,
He works with folks like us, right? Like who are foreign, who are in the US, and there's a lot at stake, right? There is no right or wrong answer
yeah.
to your situation. I get it because I've been in your position where you're weighing the pros and cons, right? The market is not good. I have a job offer in hand. I still have OPT. Maybe I'll risk it. Maybe I'll show that I'm such a great employee. I'm gonna stay up nights and I'm gonna show my worth. Back to the fact that you're a woman, you are gonna burn the candle on both ends. You are. Right? But you're thinking in your mind that this is going to be enough for them, but it's not a matter of merit, it's a matter of procedure as well, right? So what if I were you, I would read a couple of like Varun Gandhi's posts to get an idea of how to broach the topic. At the same time, this is my PhD brain talking. Instead of making assertions, always lead with curiosity, right? So instead of saying, I need an H1B, right? Most of the times, American managers will not understand what the hell is an H1B. Like they will think that it's like probably another variant of the HNB virus. Who the hell knows? Right? So instead of that, you could say that, hey, I have work authorization for the next 3 years. I know it's a long shot, but does the company have any plan to retain me, right, beyond these 3 years? How can I be authorized to continue working for you? So you're asking the same question, but you're framing it, right? Instead of saying, give me a visa, you don't, the point is not the visa. The point is you being able to work for them, right? So reframe the ask in a way that is understandable to them, and it's a win-win for both of you. Make sense?
Makes sense. Thank you so much, Aditi.
Yeah, the curiosity is the key, right? If we come across as curious versus demanding, we generally are going to get what we want.
Yeah.
And what do you want? Right?
Sponsorship.
Yeah, that's what you want. You want to stay here. You want to build your career and your life here. So that's the thing that, if that's what you want, then you've got to be curious enough and willing enough to what? Advocate on your behalf, because no one else will do it for you.
100%, 100%. But also, I want to acknowledge that I know it's really hard, Nagar, to be in a position where you're in. It's unfortunate, but you're going to learn skills that nobody's going to learn because they're not in the same position as you. You're learning to advocate for yourself very early on in the game, and that's going to pay dividends later on. I believe that. All right, last question, Sriram, go for it.
Hey, thank you so much, Aditi and Robert, for your insightful advice. So my question is, if you are in my shoes, when would you initiate the H1B conversation with an OPT or STEM OPT employer? I'm about to finish my master's this May. I still don't have a job offer yet, and I'm planning to apply for OPT like really, really soon. So
So I always recommend as soon as possible, right? I don't want you to scare off employers, which by bringing it up early in the conversation, it will. but it goes back to what I was, saying to Nagar, and that is, do you want to spend time working for someone who is never going to do this for you, and you could have known that very early on in the interview process? Or do you want to not ask the question and have all of this anxiety about the unknown? Right? My good friend Daniel Botero, he runs an organization called Opni, and what they do is they help folks like you, right, get internships and paid opportunities. And the reason why they exist is because this is one of the toughest things there is for international students to do that come here and get an advanced degree in the US. Is how do I have this conversation as I'm submitting my resume to hundreds of employers and getting constantly rejected, right?
Yep.
It's not easy. That's why Nagar doesn't want to don't ask, don't tell, right? It's because of the fear that surrounds the fact that I just got an offer. I'm really excited, but if they know my real situation that I need H1B sponsorship tomorrow, are they going to pull my offer? And so my best advice to you is as early on in the conversation as you can have it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Awesome. 8 more minutes. Robert, do you want to open the floor up to other folks, or would you like to cherry pick some questions from the list that you need answering?
I would prefer to open the floor, but I also have there was a question about India's H1B scenario if Trump is elected, and I know that can be a little polarizing, and I'd say this, no matter who's going to be in the office, I still don't have really high hopes for a lot of changes. Although we have seen the Biden administration in the last year make a very conscious effort to curb fraud, to increase efficiency within USCIS, but it's not changing the green card backlog or how difficult it is to get H-1B visas. On the Trump side of things, as we know, he's got this guy that is a trusted aide for him, whose name I don't want to say out loud, but if you follow him at all, you know who I'm talking about. His initials are SM, and that individual is very scary because he's a policy writer and he writes with hatred and vitriol, and he is as anti-immigrant as it gets. And if somebody like that gets back in, I'm very afraid of what things could look like.
Can I ask a question that is politically incorrect, but I will ask it anyhow, right?
Yeah.
In 2016, when Trump got elected, one of the narratives was that the Trump administration supports high-skilled immigration.
Yes.
So the alternate hypothesis is that, well, if the Trump administration comes in, maybe they are going to prioritize high-skilled immigration over other types of immigration pathways, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, family-based, and we've heard that, right? So because immigration is so multi-pronged, right? It's one word, but it has different umbrellas with different policies, right? So you cannot possibly put this under one monolith. So I'm curious to know about your assessment of that.
Yeah. So one of the things that was really interesting about the beginning of the Trump administration and that he ran on in his campaign was the idea of a merit-based point system. And it's something that I've been a huge proponent of, very similar to what they have in Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand. And it's based on your skills, your merit, your command of the English language, and testing around that, your spouse's credentials. And there was a bill from a Republican senator from Arkansas, Tom Cotton, and Cotton bill that actually was in the Senate that proposed a change to merit-based immigration. But very quickly from that, it died off. And, the restrictions around H-1B visas, third-party and client work sites, application rates and approval rates dropped significantly under the Trump administration. Those are the things that I think that, it started one way, but ended another. And that's why I'm very concerned about what it could look like in the future.
Puneet, go for it.
Thanks, Aditi. Robert, I heard you speak about day one CPT as a backup, but in
Yeah.
my 3 years that I've been in the US, I've not heard, unfortunately, even one case where day one CPT turned out to be a, a, a seamless immigration option, So I want to understand why you said that's a good option, because I've heard there are universities which are blacklisted, they're on the radar. So I don't want to be on a port of entry explaining my intentions, even though my intentions are good and I don't want to be an illegal immigrant,
Yeah, that's a great question. And you always have to review every scenario and alternative very cautiously. The fact that you're as aware of it as you are, I think, speaks volumes. But I will say this, why I like day one CPT: if you can financially afford it and you want to pursue a PhD type track, it gives you some options down the road. It allows you to continue to work, whether that be in a part-time or full-time capacity. But getting to the point to where you actually have a PhD gives you some flexibilities when we look at potential EB1 filings as well. So that's why I always say, look, if you can qualify and you have the financial means, that would be the easiest for you to stay where you are, continue your education while also working. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I did not know there is a PhD track that can be pursued. I always thought it's another master's degree.
No, you could do either. It's
Oh,
either.
okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll read up on it. Thank you.
Robert, I'm gonna put this website cptdog.com. Have you heard?
I have not.
Yeah, so this is something that I've seen floating around in our universe. Again, I don't endorse anything, right? Like,
Yes,
it's
same.
so
And I'm glad you actually shared that, because some folks may be interested in some of the data. So there are some sites, and I'll just drop some of these in the chat if you're ever curious and you want to do your research as well. I've got a couple of links prepared. These are just public. This is public data for companies that file H1B visas. And then there are other websites out there like H1B Grader and H1B data.info that provide information like this. But LinkedIn jobs, Dice, hired.com jobs, I saw My Visa Jobs is another one that was mentioned. There's Stilt, STILT.com, Stilt.com is another one. Angel List is another one that I've seen. There's also Tech Fetch, and these are all just aggregate and compilers that are collecting jobs and folks that may potentially sponsor H1B visas. My Visa Jobs is one that I always bring up too. I have no interest financially or personally in any of these. I just mention them as resources, kind of like you did with CPT Dog. You have to collect this information and decipher it and form your own opinion about what is best for you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the message that I've always had on the platform, Dr. P. And I think that's why folks are interested in my opinion, right? That's really all this is. This is not legal advice. This is me recommending career coaching is really what it is. Because the goal ultimately is to live and work here in the U.S., to provide an opportunity to establish yourself, create experience, and ultimately, build a life. And so I am the great grandson of immigrants. And so I've always been interested in international skills and globalization of immigration. And so that coinciding with, my recruiting background is what's led to this being an absolute passion for me. And, I want to thank the 30 plus folks that joined us here on Saturday morning, and everyone who asked questions. I really appreciate, all of you taking time, and Dr. P for having me on too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Robert. I know we had a couple of change of dates, but I'm so appreciative of you taking the time to advise all of us. And I do want to say that this system that you're working up against, like somebody told me this and I did not like realize this, Robert, is when you go to classrooms and then you have these like chairs that like things that open up, and most of them are right-handed, right?
Yeah.
And left-handed folks find it hard to adjust because these things were never meant for left-handed folks. This is the same for all of us over here. The fact that you're finding it difficult to talk about H-1B sponsorship, the fact that you're finding it hard to find H-1B jobs, the fact that you're losing out on opportunities, you're working up against a system that is not supportive of you. That's the problem, right?
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with you. So please do not internalize any of these struggles. You're working up against a system that unfortunately doesn't support you yet. And all we can do is do our best. And you did your
That's right.
best showing up today and investing an hour of your life listening to like Robert and learning from his expertise. So you should be very proud of yourself is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think it's about bringing awareness and then
That's
vocalizing that awareness, right? And that's, I think one of the things that's made me really unique is that not only my opinions, but my advocacy and sharing this message to others, because we cannot confuse the two types of immigration that exist here. The crisis at the border that we have is real and it is impacting all of us. But we cannot confuse that with the employment-based crisis as it relates to the very finite number of H-1B visas and the green card backlog, which is a humanitarian crisis in and of its own right. And so the more that we are aware of it and talk about it and bring advocacy to it, the higher the probability of change for the better is. And so you nailed it, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Be informed, stay curious.
Yeah, be informed, stay curious. That's the best advice that we could, like Robert could have given us. I've put Robert's website in the chat. If you'd like to support his work, which I implore you do. But thank you again, Robert, for all your time and your advice.
Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn, please. It's R. Bouchard on LinkedIn. Everything else is at the H1B guy on my channels. So please don't be a stranger, and would love to come back on sometime again if it makes sense.
Oh my gosh, yes, Robert. I mean, absolutely. Thank you again, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, and thanks again, Robert. I owe you one. Bye.